Hi, thanks for joining me. I hope you're having a great day. Today we're going to go over some watercolor techniques which you'll then be able to use in your own artwork.
For this video, you'll need watercolor paper, watercolors, a paintbrush, marker, cloth, water, crayons, some crinkled saran wrap, and salt. Our first technique is called a wash. To create a wash, you pre-mix paint and water and then apply the paint side to side and top to bottom. You want to make it look smooth and even. A graded wash is similar to the original wash where you used pre-mixed paint and water and you're applying it side to side and top to bottom. However, as you go, you're going to add more water so that it gradually becomes lighter and lighter. A variegated wash is similar to the first two washes where you pre-mix the paint and the water and you can apply it side to side and top to bottom. However, instead of adding more water, you can add another color as you go. This should create a smooth and gradual color change. As you can see, my first attempt was a little bit too light, and that's okay. I just went over it again with the colors. The next watercolor technique is a bleed, and to do that, first you put down just clear water, and then you add a color to the water. And as you can see, it starts to expand. When I add the second color, the two colors will begin to bleed together. Sometimes you have to lift the paper up and move it around to get the colors to bleed and mix. If it's too light, you can always add some more of the color and mix it around again. There are different methods to apply the paint. One of them is called wet on dry, and that's actually the same thing as what we did with the wash. So we're using paint that's been pre-mixed with water and adding that to a dry canvas or paper. Another technique to add the paint to the paper is called wet on wet, and that's where we have the wet brush and paint applied to the wet paper. And it's exactly the same thing as what we did with the bleed. So we put the clear water on first so that the paper's wet, and then we add wet paint into the water, and you'll see it starts to expand and it will be able to move around. The next watercolor technique is called layering. To create layering, you use several overlapping washes of color with increasing intensity. Each layer needs to be completely dry before you add the next layer. Otherwise, the colors will bleed. I'm only adding the second layer to part of the square so that you can see the difference in color. Layering creates depth and value to your artwork. Another method of adding paint to a paper is called dry brush. You use a dry paintbrush and you apply the brush to a dry surface. You do need to add a little bit of water into the paint, otherwise nothing will be on the brush. So I just used a little squirt bottle, sprayed one squirt in, and then it was wet enough that I could get some paint on the paintbrush. The reason for using dry brush technique is so that you can really show the texture of the surface of the paper. Since our section with the layering is dry, let's go ahead and add one more layer to it so you can see the difference in color as you increase the amount of paint on the paper. Once the paint is down on the paper, there's actually a technique to bring the paint back off the paper, and that's called lift. So I'm going to show you 3 different ways. The first way is to use a clean brush and then you dab it on the cloth to dry it off a little, and it will actually bring the paint back off of the paper. As you can see, it's lightening the color. The second technique is by using a towel. This one, you put the paint down and then you can use a towel or a Kleenex to lift the paint off the paper. The third way to create lift is with plastic. So you can use saran wrap and you just bunch it together and press it down, and you do let it dry. Where the plastic is resting on the paint, it will leave darker marks. You can use this to create roses or a pretty water background. Resist is the next watercolor technique, and that's where you protect an area from paint by using something that resists water, so that when you put the watercolor paint over it by using a wash, then the item that you drew will then show up through the watercolor. Next is scarring, and you can scar your paper by adding scratches that are linear into the paper, and when you put the paint over it, it will then settle into the scratches and you'll be able to see the lines. Salt is a fun technique where you take salt crystals and you sprinkle it over a wash or other painted area to create texture. This works great for backgrounds. The final watercolor technique that we're going to learn about is called splatter, and it's one of the messiest ones. You take a colored-filled brush and you tap it on your finger to create texture. If there's an area that you don't want to have painted, then you do need to mask or cover that area, otherwise it will get all over. I hope you find this tutorial helpful so that you can use all these techniques in your own art. Please like this video so others can find it, and keep on creating every day.